the untouchable genius of the American Mafia. He didn't fire a weapon. He didn't run the streets with brass knuckles, but every man who did answered to him. He turned crime into accounting, violence into strategy, and gambling into global business. They called him the mob's accountant, but he was more than a bookkeeper. He was the architect of organized crime in America. While the world focused on the gangsters who made headlines, one man was building an empire in the shadows. His name was Mayer Lansky. And for nearly half a century, he was untouchable. Behind the scenes of every high-profile gangster, Luciano, Siegel, Capone, stood a quiet figure with cold eyes and sharper numbers. He didn't wear flashy suits or carry a cigar between his fingers. He didn't spray bullets in broad daylight. No, Lansky didn't need the spotlight. Because in the underworld, control isn't about showing off. It's about staying hidden, and that was his art. Mayer Lansky was the silent master behind one of the most powerful criminal syndicates the world had ever seen. While others rose and fell in violence, he survived decades of police raids, federal investigations, political revolutions, even betrayals from within. He built empires with contracts and casino chips. He fought wars with bank accounts, and his name, though whispered, became legendary. But how did a poor Jewish boy from Eastern Europe come to control the darkest corners of American wealth? How did he manage to stay out of prison when everyone around him ended up behind bars, or worse? This is the story of a ghost, a genius, a man who outsmarted the system and rewrote the rules of crime. This is the story of Mayer Lansky, the immigrant. With a mind for power, in 1902, a baby named Mayer+lansky was born in Grodno, then part of the Russian Empire. Life was bleak. He was Jewish, which meant persecution was part of the daily routine. Pogroms swept through towns like storms, leaving fear and silence in their wake. His family, like many others, knew their only hope was escape. So when Mayer was 9, they boarded a ship to America, escaping brutality, chasing dreams. They landed in New York City and settled in the Lower East Side, a buzzing, chaotic melting pot of immigrants all trying to survive. There, Lansky saw two kinds of men, those who bowed to pressure and those who mastered it. From a young age, he showed signs of sharp thinking. Numbers fascinated him. Strategy intrigued him, and when he met another street-smart kid named Charles Luciano, later known as Lucky, his path was sealed. Luciano had muscle. Lansky had mind. Together they began dabbling in small-time rackets, dice games, card hustles, bootlegging whispers. But while most kids were getting into trouble, Lansky was studying, watching how the world worked, how power moved quietly. He didn't just want to make money, he wanted to understand the structure, the mechanics, the math of control. By the time he was a teenager, Mayer Lansky had already made a name for himself among neighborhood criminals, not as a fighter, but as a thinker. He wasn't big and he wasn't loud, but he could read a man like a ledger, and he never forgot a number. Building a criminal machine, the 1920s brought prohibition, and with it, opportunity. America had banned alcohol. But demand didn't vanish, it exploded. Speakeasies popped up like mushrooms, and smugglers scrambled to meet demand. Lansky was ready. Alongside Luciano, he began operating a liquor smuggling network through Canada and the Caribbean. But unlike his peers, Lansky didn't rely on violence or brute strength. He focused on logistics. He charted routes. He used legitimate businesses as fronts. He moved product with precision, and more importantly, he moved money cleanly. Lansky understood laundering before the term existed. He used shell companies, fake names, and offshore accounts. While others were being caught with barrels and guns, Lansky was counting silent profits. He expanded into illegal gambling, but again, his casinos weren't dens of chaos. They were quiet, well-managed operations. And they generated millions, one of his golden principles. Always pay your debts. Always make your people feel secure. And never let the law know where the cash really goes. While other gangsters made enemies, Lansky built networks. He didn't yell, he didn't threaten. He suggested, and people listened. By the end of the decade, he had become the financial brain behind some of the most feared men in America, and yet the average citizen had no idea who he was. The National Crime Syndicate in 1931, after the bloody collapse of the old Sicilian Mafia leadership, a vacuum of power emerged. Luciano and Lansky stepped in, but instead of triggering more chaos, they proposed something new: organization. Together, they formed what became known as the National Crime Syndicate, an umbrella council made up of Italian, Jewish, and even Irish criminal families. Each had its own territory, rules, and responsibilities. It was Lansky who designed the financial systems. It was Lansky who created the dispute resolution protocols. And it was Lansky who ensured that when a problem arose, it was handled with subtlety and precision. He even helped coordinate the activities of a special enforcement group known later as Murder, Inc., a group that dealt with those who broke the rules. Lansky never gave direct orders to them. He didn't need to. Suggestions in his voice were commands. His influence stretched from New York to Chicago to Las Vegas and beyond. While others were visible and vulnerable, Lansky built power quietly. To the outside world, he was just a businessman with a keen eye for numbers. To the underworld, he was the architect behind their golden age, and with every passing year, his name carried more weight and yet remained in the shadows. Havana and the global empire, Lansky's vision wasn't limited to America. By the late 1930s, his eyes were set on Havana, Cuba, a sun-drenched paradise where the laws were loose and the potential for gambling profits was massive. He began investing in Cuban casinos and hotels, turning Havana into a playground for American tourists, celebrities, and criminals alike. His crown jewel, the Hotel Nacional. Lavish, prestigious, and dripping in power. Here, Lansky wasn't just running games, he was shaping policy. He had connections with Cuban politicians, military generals, even President Batista himself. With cash flowing and influence rising, Lansky transformed Havana into the Las Vegas of the Caribbean, but his empire didn't stop there. He had hands in casinos across Miami, New Orleans, and eventually, Vegas. Every table that turned chips was another piece of his growing puzzle. He even spread financial influence into Europe and South America, always keeping a network of silent investors and discreet associates. But success breeds enemies. And the Cuban Revolution in 1959, led by Fidel Castro, shattered Lansky's paradise. Casinos were seized, properties were nationalized. Within days, Lansky lost millions. Still, he didn't crumble. He retreated quietly, regrouped, and focused on his remaining operations in the U.S. and elsewhere. His strength wasn't just in expansion, it was in resilience. The law closes in. Despite his low profile, Lansky couldn't escape forever. In the 1960s and 70s, the U.S. government intensified its crackdown on organized crime. The FBI had a new weapon, RICO laws, designed to go after entire criminal enterprises. Lansky's name began appearing more and more in investigative reports. The IRS wanted him. The FBI watched him. Journalists whispered about his offshore wealth. In 1970, facing indictments for tax evasion, Lansky tried to flee to Israel under the law of return, a policy that allowed Jewish people to seek refuge. But the U.S. pushed for his extradition. After lengthy legal battles, Israel denied his stay. He was forced to return to America and face trial. But even then, the government couldn't pin him down. Key witnesses fell silent. Records vanished, and just like that, he slipped away again. He was dubbed the man who got away. Time after time. The final days, in his last years, Mayer Lansky wasn't a fugitive. He lived quietly in Miami Beach, an old man with a cane, occasionally walking near the water. Authorities estimated he was worth hundreds of millions, but Lansky insisted he was nearly broke. Whether it was truth or masterful deception remains a mystery. He spent his time with family. Neighbors saw him as just another retiree, quiet, polite, reserved. He was never flashy, never loud. And perhaps that was his final lesson to the world of crime, that true power leaves no fingerprints on the January 15th, 1983, Mayer Lansky passed away peacefully at the age of 80. No major trials, no convictions, no public downfall, just whispers. His story became legend. Movies were inspired by him. Books speculated on his fortune. And to this day, his full financial empire has never been entirely mapped. Lansky had rewritten the rules, not by force, but by intelligence. Not through fear, but through foresight. In a world of crime, he was a ghost. In a world of greed, he was the architect. And in a world of chaos, he remained composed. This was Mayer Lansky, the man who never pulled the trigger but always controlled who did.
The case may be closed, but criminology never sleeps. Like and subscribe at join Criminology and step deeper into the dark with us.